Hey, welcome back. And joining us today is returning guest, Professor Dave Collum, best known for his year in review and commentary. And I would consider Dave almost kind of like a Renaissance man. You draw and have, commentary and insights on things from a myriad of different fields as opposed to something very siloed. So that's something I admire about you. But how you been?
I'm good. As I was telling you before the podcast started, life's complicated. The older you get, the more complicated it gets, and the less capable you get of dealing with the complications. So you can't remember why you have a doctor's appointment, things like that. And we had some shit hit the fan. My wife broke her ribs. I have 5 dogs. 2 started brawling for no reasons. We had to give one of them away. Fortunately, we gave it to my son, and it was 3 kids and 2 dogs, and the dog was as happy as can be. But just shit happening. But as I said, there's people who have no idea where their next meal's coming from. So you have to put it in. These are first world problems. I have leaves in my swimming pool.
I hear you on that front. It's funny is sometimes I find myself, I guess this is human nature. You find yourself getting caught up in things that are champagne problems. And
they are, the fact that light is not turning green fast enough will not in any way affect your life.
Yep. Absolutely. Well, in light of, I was mentioning to you before I started hit recording, and then you're like, probably should just hit recording. So I figured, what the hell, we'll do it. But when I first had you on, and I'll just preface, I'm still cutting my teeth, so I'm not going to postulate or posture myself as some, podcast expert, have it all down. But when I first had you on, still very green, just in terms of just understanding what's going on, different ideas, iterations, mental models. And it has, as I've mentioned to ad nauseum on other episodes, profoundly changed the way I look at things. And with guests I brought on, meeting with people from all over the world, and you can't put a price on that. And especially with what's going on, this backdrop, geopolitically, socially, financially, a lot of people are still in the dark. I would say most people are bereft of what's going on.
Yeah, I think there's things that seem undeniably true that the majority of the population who's not paying attention have absolutely no idea it's even an issue. And it's, so there's these honeycombs of information. If you're getting your info from Fox or CNN or whatever, there's no chance you're seeing what the average person, as a podcaster, for example, you bring in 100 guys and they start expressing opinions, you're going to get your bones rattled right to your core pretty fast, because they too get around and they too are reading, and so you're really doing it. You're crowdsourcing information in a way that you're not going to get from the networks. And I think people are slowly but surely waking up to the fact that everything is a lie, and that nothing. Geez, that was a call from my brother-in-law. That's a weird one. That nothing is as it appears to be. I like to ask people the rhetorical question: is there any documentable example of a sovereign state that hasn't lied to optimize its narrative? And you think about it for a second, you go, no, never. Right? They're always going to lie. They're not going to say, "Oh yeah, we fucked up," right? No, they're not going to do that. And then you start therefore saying, "Well, what happened on this event? What happened on this event?" And you realize you don't know. You don't know unless you've got good inside information. A great example is, by the way, like the Iranian war. Who's running out of weapons, ammo? I don't know, and I try, but they say that we've devastated the Iranian military. And then there's very sharp guys like Colonel McGregor who says they've got a buttload of things coming at us, and they've been using the garbage, and then they're going to use the good stuff, and then you're going to find out how much damage Iran can do, right? Who's right? Those are polar. And one of my friends, a guy named Grant Williams, he said at some point one side will be shooting weapons and the other side won't. You'll go, okay, we've got our answer. And until that day comes, and I know smart guys who have both views, hold both views.
Yeah,
where do you come down? You're ex-military. You must have an opinion on this.
Yeah, I don't think. Well, let me just preface by saying I since I first had you on some time ago, I went from thinking the world is, you've got sovereign actors, and yeah, there are lobbyists, and yeah, there's, deep state or deep politics, to more of a mental model that things are more centralized than people realize. It goes beyond the simple deep state narrative. Old families, other organizations like the Vatican, which nobody really talks about. Everyone focuses on the one particular group, and I'm not absolving wrinkles of that completely, but I'll just say that I think there's kayfabe going on. There's theater going on. That this is serving an agenda. Um, you know, capital controls at some point, energy lockdowns, things of that nature. I don't think so. I just wanted to preface with that. But to answer your question, I don't think from the traditional narrative, left, right, Iran versus U.S., Israel, I don't think the U.S., Israel will win. I think Iran has the upper hand. Obviously, they have some of the best engineers in the world. Their country is like twice the size of Texas. Obviously, very
Yeah, you're not going to
mountainous.
occupy that like the Gaza Strip, right? Let's
Yeah,
start with that, right?
yeah. These are not knuckle draggers. These people are sophisticated. I think,
98% literacy rate.
yeah. Oh, you look at our country. you know. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, some people who could barely walk and chew gum, and so, yeah, I don't see that. I've also heard I had on. I guess I found out recently. I didn't realize Cameron McGregor is. I guess it should have been obvious, but it is the son of Colonel Douglas McGregor. But I've had Cameron on a couple of times, and he mentioned about how the U.S. military is behind in terms of certain technologies. Believe it or not, and the discontent. Now you asked my background. I'm not going to pretend to be some military expert, but I'll just say that, and I was a corpsman, so, and I didn't do any sexy or although some of them do some pretty badass stuff. I'll just say that morale wasn't the best, at least in my perspective, in the fleet, in big Navy, for those who are not familiar with that, and so I can only imagine today when you also add that a lot of these Gen Z and millennials, and I think a lot of people fail to forget how young the military is. I mean the worker bee. I mean, very young, of course.
Yeah, 18-ish, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. And they're on social media. They don't get their news from legacy media platforms, Fox, MSNBC. It's by and large they're seeing what's going on. They're seeing other narratives, and we've seen what they did to, one of the carriers, right, where they damaged it and they had to go and
Well, you're
repair.
not hearing about that on the mainstream press. Someone said, yeah, someone told me, they said that I have contacts in that region of the world, and they said, you have no idea how much damage they did to our fleet. And they go, no. And they said, oh yeah, they really pounded the crap out of us.
Well, I'll also add this. There was an event that happened a number of years ago. I'm sure you caught wind of it, where in San Diego, they started a huge fire on one of the vessels, and it was like, I don't know if it was like $1 billion worth of damage that was rendered. But it was apparently obviously somebody who was very discontent. I mean, people are not happy, and I suspect that's the case with a lot of the other branches I've mentioned on other episodes. I mean, if people saw how enlisted people live, and I get it. Some people are like, well, you should have known what you signed up for, et cetera. I mean, barracks looks like a third world, looks like something out of Midnight Express or something. Just cinder blocks or whatever to the food. It's and it's like its own ecosystem, its own world. It's a very interesting experience to have. But yeah, I think people are not fond of this. They don't. Yeah, I don't see people rallying behind the flag, so to speak, on this one.
No, not a bit. And certainly it's very generational. So the boomers are the most likely to support this war. And I think it's just because they've got 40, 50 years of the traditional view of what's going on in the Middle East, right? The old school view. So as a boomer, what I can tell you is probably 2 or 3 years ago, I said my view would have been, look, Israel's surrounded by enemies. They're tough as nails. They've got to be tough as nails. They won't survive if they're not tough as nails. So I gave them the benefit of the doubt. They've just done everything imaginable to lose my support. It took a lot. It's a military analyst who said, Dave, you're trying to understand the world without, and you're refusing to try to understand Israel, which I really was. I was saying, look, I'm not going there. It's not worth going there. Don't touch that third rail. Don't do it. And then he said, read Mearsheimer's book. So I did, and I go, oh Jesus, that changed the story, doesn't it? And then you just watch stuff like in the last few days, we've been watching official, I believe to be official Israeli sources, which are celebrating that they just passed a law that they're now going to execute Palestinian terrorists. Now, you go, well, okay, so what? And I go, well, but they've got a lot of them, and the definition of terrorist is not well defined, and they have a 99% conviction rate, which shows you that it's not really a court of law. Right? It's really, because 99% is like saying you batted 850 in baseball, and or 990, and they're celebrating, they're toasting it, they're showing videos of people pouring champagne, and then they showed some guy with a noose talking about how this is what we're going to do, and I'm going, celebrating executions of prisoners should never be done. Let's start with that. Should never be done. It's a horror. It might be necessary, but it's a reality that you shouldn't be celebrating, period. And they're acting very happy. And I go, you guys are looking bad. I don't know why you're doing it. If I were running a PR campaign for Israel, Iran, by the way, has got a great PR campaign. So if you go search on YouTube, I don't suggest you do it right now, but if those who are listening, put a pause on it for a second, go search streets of Tehran. What you'll find is what a bunch of videos, they look like they're put up by the Chamber of Commerce of Iran to me, right? They look fake, not fake, staged. But what they show is an extremely westernized world. Now you can say, well, okay, but they're staged. I go, but that's what they're conveying, right? If they were really as nuts as we're told, they wouldn't convey that. That would be blasphemy to them, right? And everyone's walking around. No one's got a face covered. Blue jeans. The place looks like a great place to be. You go, I'm going to Iran. That looks like a fun place to take a vacation, right? That is what they want to convey. Now, maybe it's propaganda for the war stuff, but then when I said, okay, so let's find better videos. So I found videos the year that 2018 when Iran beat Morocco in the World Cup. And they showed the videos of the celebrations. And those are obviously therefore spontaneous videos, right? Those are spontaneous. And there's Iranian chicks with painted faces, drunker than shit, blowing horns and stuff. And I go, still looks like New York City. Looks like Philadelphia having won the Super Bowl, which they destroyed their city, of course. But it looked Western to me. And so we are told that we're bombing this barbaric regime, and I don't buy it. I'm sure there's barbaric guys in the regime, but we have Lindsey Graham. That's like the ace of Trump.
Oh, did you see those images and pictures of him over in Disneyland, over in Orlando during the shutdown?
Yes. Isn't there like some court order keeping him away from young children or something? There must be.
Some of the stuff I've heard, and I don't know if it's real or not. It's pretty gross. It's pretty gross. Some of the stuff.
By the way, Disney has trouble. Disney, the corporation, has trouble. And I'm sure that the digging you've done since our first interview, Disney's got Freemason written all over it. It's got all sorts of pedophilia problems from the past. No, the Disney corporation has got some seriously embedded problems.
Well, okay. I didn't mean to make light of that when I
nothing funnier than pedophilia. So you got to make light of it.
I have gone deep down the rabbit hole as well. Probably not as deep as you. God, there's so many different directions. You also covered things I want to circle back on here, but since we're talking about this stuff, is
like Jen Psaki, we'll circle back on that.
Okay, so I'll just. The pedophilia stuff, the trafficking is probably one of the most underrated topics nobody freaking talks about. even in the biggest alternative media people who I suspect, and I could be wrong, I think a lot of these people are controlled. People that were previously on big television shows who invite guests on. I think there's some controlled opposition, Pegasus kind of play, capture intel data or whatever, steer the people kind of like Q, right? Drop truth and then steer the white hats or whoever's going to come save you, i.e. Trump or whoever else. Trust the system. I have brought on a number of SRA victims. I brought on Max Sloan. I don't know if you're familiar with her. Obviously, you know Kathy O'Brien. I've had her on.
I was on a Zoom call with Kathy at one point. Yeah.
I've had on. Gosh, I'm blinking on who.
Annika Lucas, Juliet Engel.
Yeah, a number of. Yeah, and it's it is amazing how dark and how deep it goes. And again, nobody talks about it, obviously for obvious reasons. But what's really blown my mind, and I'll mention, is I've had on guests. You obviously hear there's a certain group that is in the spotlight. They are behind everything, and the banking, and you hear it ad nauseum. And I'm not dismissing that there's not truth in that. I'm not dismissing that. But what I have come to realize is that you have other groups. You have like the Vatican, which is trafficking on a mass scale, and
well, let's
Jesuits.
Look at Carlo Vigano, Archbishop Carlo Vigano. I was on a Zoom call with Carlo, and he started right out talking about how all the European leaders were pedophiles. Right? He just banged right down that rabbit hole, and he was supposedly number 3 at the Vatican. I don't know how they rank them. I don't know if they have stripes on their sleeves or what. But what did they do to him? They excommunicated him.
I watched the videos. I watched not the excommunication part of it. I watched the video of him calling out the people, and when you hear and listen to different people, it's like it's all these disparate parts, and you have to try and compile it and bring it all together. And even though certain people have differences of opinion as it relates to the power structure in the world, there are certain themes that permeate the narrative that whether you're on this side of alt media or that or whatever, there are certain themes, and that the trafficking, the satanic elements and the things that are being enacted. It is crazy. And, I think we got a taste of it, or some people did in the Epstein tranche that was dropped, but
which is now dead silent.
Yeah.
So here's dead silence, right? I don't think they started the war in Iran to overcome the Epstein story. My guess is that actually they stalled on the Epstein story to time it with the start of a war in Iran. So I said, look, we'll put it out there and then we'll bury it because we know the war is going to start at the state, that sort of thing. And so that's gone. And then the thing I like to ask, you can hear CNN talk about 350,000 kids got trafficked over the southern border. You can hear it on CNN, right? And at no point does that talking head say, by the way, where did they all go? Who are the consumers of these fine children? Now, again, Gunderson back in the early 90s said that a blonde-haired, blue-eyed kid, which is not coming from Mexico, of course, but from Eastern Europe, blonde-haired, blue-eyed kid bring 50 grand on the open market. Where are the consumers of these children? And whenever you see one, it's always some perv in a van with free candy written on the side. That's not the consumer.
I've heard
Annika Lucas got cornered by Patrick Bet-David one day. Now, a lot of these trafficked women had like one owner, and they lent the kid out, but there was like one owner. There was a dominant male figure in their lives, and I don't know why that would be, but and Patrick Bet-David cornered her. He had somehow done his homework, and he cornered her, and he said, "Was it David Rockefeller?" And she started crying, and she said, I didn't agree to go here. I didn't. She finally said, yes, it was David Rockefeller. Right. And so, there's, I think, Kathy O'Brien accuses Gerald Ford. They always, by the way, they never accuse the living. And I think that's because they don't want to die. So you accuse the dead guys, just say, okay, they're dead. That's fine. They'll accuse Bill Clinton and Prince Andrew, or former Prince Andrew. Now we'll just call him Prince. But they don't accuse the living, because the living have a reason to off them, to cap them. So if they avoid naming the living, then people say we're okay with that. But it also can't unravel, because if it unraveled, as Sidney Powell said, governments would fall.
Yeah, who was I was thinking of? I don't know if it was the speaker mentioned that if I'm paraphrasing something to the effect of if the full Epstein or the full of what's really going on, it would just completely unwind everything, and I completely agree with that. I think very much so much has been obfuscated, not just in terms of people's mental model of how power operates, but the healthcare industry, education. Called woohoo spirituality or what have you, or there's so many other things that have obviously been obfuscated. I think people would literally go nuts. They wouldn't believe it. What was I going to mention here? You mentioned something as sound of freedom. I have heard from some people that was kind of like here's truth, but let's steer the direction. Because if I'm not mistaken, I saw the film and spent some time, that was mainly predicated on kind of like these kind of the creepy guy in the van, and he's going down south to go. But it did not depict, if I recall, this very wealthy predator class that is, flying in jets, meeting in, castles, doing hunting parties, things of that nature. It just narrative control.
And if the listener doesn't know what a hunting party is, they're not deep enough. I was supposed to be on a Zoom call with Ballard, and it got bombed by trolls, and so they had to shut down. And I came 15 minutes late, and it was too late to get in. I wouldn't have asked him anything anyways. But what was noticeable on the Zoom call, this is a Zoom group I would go to twice a week. He talked about raising money for the sequel, and I go, why? You made a fortune off the first movie. Why do you need to raise money? And he said, well, he didn't get any of them. And I go, well, the guys who got the money would be happy to pay for a sequel. Let's start with that, because they made money on the first one. And I think Casavial was sincere, and I don't trust Ballard, not a bit. And so I think Ballard was kind of and I've seen too many pictures of Ballard with bad guys. And so when the movie first came out, there was a pushback, and my first instinct was the pushback was to defend the pedos. But I think some of the pushback was saying, don't trust this guy. And so I think part of the story is true, and part of it's highly glorified. And again, the pervs are just dirty pervs. They're not people of wealth and power. And that's where the story completely misses. Completely misses.
Now you mentioned about
pervs the simple pervs can't afford them.
No, you're right. You're right. You mentioned about the disappearance of it. Our mutual friend Michael Yon has obviously mentioned quite a bit about that. Where did they go? I think they were being held in Walmart supercenters or something like that.
There were whole NGOs that were involved in trafficking. You can get manifests and stuff, and the workers and everything. It's all out there. NGOs, tax dollars that ran organizations, sort of like Somali daycare facilities, right? Same thing. The money flows.
So then, okay, so I imagine once these kids are used, so to speak, that then they are offed, and then what becomes of the body? And I assume that's
fascinating question.
I've heard wild speculation. Again, I don't know the veracity of it. I've heard that a lot of some of these fast food chains, that there's something going on.
Oh, I don't mind fast food. You just ruined that one for me.
I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised. Or I don't know, but obviously,
wow. Wow, that Whopper really takes on new meaning. Yeah, so someone actually said, if until you can explain where the bodies go, your model doesn't hold up as well as you'd like. And I go, I have faith that you know how to get rid of bodies. There could be mass graves out there that just are not in sight, right? There were entire NGOs, warehouses of kids that were not in sight. So graves ought to be trivial, because those guys aren't even talking. They're dead.
Well, to circle back on another point you made as it relates to the law being passed, regarding the Palestinian prisoners, being executed. I think there was a video I saw on X about him showing these gas chambers effectively, or, something, how they're going to, kill them. And, also, I saw another clip, a video of a guy protesting. I don't know if he was at some parliament or something, talking about how a lot of human skin is being trafficked, from these dead bodies over in Gaza.
What's it being used for?
I'm assuming for medical purposes. I mean, I'm sure it's very lucrative, just like organ.
Well, certainly body parts in general. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the organ harvesting.
Skin grafting.
I don't think there's enough pervs to consume the number of kids who disappear. Just as simple perviness. I think a great source as a large source of kids is Eastern Europe. I think that's a big place, and Ukraine in particular now, I figure, because there's got to be a lot of orphans in Ukraine. Let's start with that. And Eastern Europe's historically been a real problem, and which is why the whole Erica Kirk working out of Ukraine in an orphanage story. Talk about someone who looks so unreal. Erica Kirk. How can you look at Erica Kirk and see a grieving? I know there's people out there who seem to defend her, although they could be trolls. I have not been able to figure out the relationship of trolls to the narrative. I see it in comment sections, but.
Well, okay, so when Charlie first, and again, I'm still hearing different viewpoints and things, but when he first died, I thought, oh my gosh, like, fill in the blank, as we all are. And then seeing her, and I thought, man, that takes a lot to speak to the camera. I think this was her first appearance after his death. She did the YouTube live, and I thought, wow, like she's really
she did the hug Charlie at the casket thing.
Or yeah, it was actually even before that. And then as more and more videos of her, I just and more people are talking, like there's definitely something weird going on, because that's not normal grieving. And the whole and how it's been turned into this Hollywood style, just the casket, and then also just the fireworks. Like it's weird. It's weird.
And the bug eyes, and the fact that she's never shed a real tear, and the fact that, like, the first time when she wiped her tears away during the fireworks display called the memorial service, in which neither set of parents was present for some reason. She wiped her tears away 8 times, someone counted, and they were always on the left side. So apparently only her left eyeball was tearing by that model, or she just kept doing this. Now she does both sides. Someone said, don't do just one side. That doesn't work. There's some theories out there that said this whole thing was, part of it was to destroy TPUSA, and they've done a fine job if that's the case. There's no way TPUSA has been anything but just destroyed by this. If they really thought she could take over for Charlie, they were completely overestimating her skill set. Because so my suspicion on Erica is that she was sort of trafficked from childhood. She's got all the survivor traits. So my guess is that she's one of these kids who was grabbed right out of the crib pretty much and groomed. And it's like training a working dog. And someone spotted her physical attributes and said, oh, we can work with that. And her mother's deep state. She's done CIA videos. There's just so many goddamn things wrong. She got kicked out of Romania for trafficking children. How do you get kicked out of Romania, right? Holy moly. Maybe I'm underestimating Romania, but so everything's wrong with that story. Everything.
Well, I had, again, you should connect with Max Lowen. She spoke about the MK Ultra and the things that go on, how it's amazing how it starts, as I'm sure you've encountered, how it starts, I guess the term is prenatal or while the baby's still in the womb, how they start. I mean, it sounds so wacky. It sounds so wacky. Some people tune in and are like, this is out there. Talking to the fetus, using sound and other things to start to program it, and then upon
prenatal development's huge.
Yeah,
there's no question that babies in the womb learn dialect. So not only when they come out do they know mom's and dad's voice, but they actually recognize. You get different response. Let's say mom's Indian. Someone else who's Indian, they pick up on more than someone who's, say, American. Right, the babies already know differences in dialect. My son is a musician. My wife was flat on her back during pregnancy, and she played classical music into her womb. My son's got an ear that won't quit. I mean, he just got a truly stupendous ability to hear, and I think that's why I became a musician. So
I
that's
remember.
classic neurobio.
I remember you mentioning that. That's it makes you wonder. I mean, we're talking about some of the highlights you are as it relates to your son and being musically inclined, but also the negative ramifications that a lot of being in the fetus still, before they're born, of course, people are exposed to that are negative in nature, right? And so, but Max talked about that, and then how they'll kill the mother in front of the baby as far as the first, whatever you want to call it, and then they'll start. You mentioned about the cats and torturing and kind of getting inculcated into desensitized, and then become and then being trained, as Anika and others have alluded to, being trained to be spies and
Well, she said
carry.
they are all trained to kill. Annika says they're all trained to kill. She tells us two horror stories that are so vividly burned in my brain. One is she complained to be hungry, and they brought out a half-rotten corpse and made all the kids eat it. And the other was they gave her a puppy, which was the only bright thing in her life, and then they made her kill it. And I'm just sitting there going, these people are going to burn in hell. And on the other hand, they're Satanists, so of course they are. That seems to be their goal. So the thing that's abiological to me is that the entry of the kids into the system is often through the family. Where in biology does donating your kid to Satanists fall into the evolutionary ladder? It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I saw Laura Logan. She had this gentleman on. Maybe you saw the clip. It was circulating on X. It was a guy in Hollywood. I think it was a stuntman, and I'm paraphrasing him. He basically said, "I can't confirm." Excuse me. He said something to the effect of, "I can't. I don't have evidence to show you. I can't. I haven't experienced it, something like that." But he said, "I can tell you with a high degree of confidence that in Hollywood, if you want to get to the higher echelons." You've got to make that, you've got to, transition someone or someone. A lot of weird people have been transitioned or have been killed. So, and
So
they
I've
go to
done
the,
a ton. I've done a ton of Nick.
yeah.
I've had a lot of exchanges with Nick Bryant, both directly by phone and by Zoom and things like that. And he says Hollywood is just hopelessly corrupt. The whole Diddy story, everything, it's just from head to toe corrupt.
Yeah. And to the cage matches that go on, if you listen to that Alondra Lotman interview he did with Anika, yeah, you got to check this guy. His name's Alondra Lotman, and he did an interview on Anika, and he was talking about cage fighting that goes on. And he was at one where they'll fight to the death. And you have kids will try and hide razor blades under their nails or try and yeah. And then what else was I going to mention? And then also deep underground in the Vatican chambers, super deep, where it's considered an honor to partake in these occult.
The occult's real. It's very hard to know when you're being led down a dead end, right? Because part of the way you cover it up is by throwing out enough debris that, especially if it's demonstrably false, such that you feel like an idiot buying into it. So it makes it very hard to separate fact from fiction if they throw out a bunch of fiction, and so but the occult is undeniably real. It is undeniably bigger than 99.9% of the population thinks. And it's just undeniably hard to get your arms around how big it is.
Well, and I've had on different people. I've had on Zach Hubbard. I don't know if you've heard of him. His whole thing is gematria, and his thesis is that the Jesuit order really runs the show. That they use the tiny hats as the scapegoat, direct attention, etc. I mean, and numerology, and he wrote a book that's pretty interesting. I actually have it, and the timing of events, and it's. I mean, obviously, these people take it very seriously. So I think if they're taking it seriously, okay, there's something to something to look into and to be aware of. Do you? I mean, do you look at what goes on as being like WWE on the world stage in terms of these people being controlled, or do you feel that these nations, some say, oh, we have to be with BRICS because BRICS is going against the globalists, or we need to do this or do that? I mean, what is your mental model of things?
My mental model's getting fragile because it's getting progressive. I feel like the more I learn, the less I know. I first went in to study this stuff because I was seeing geopolitically unexplainable events, and I kept thinking there's some sort of gravitational force out there that I don't understand. And how do you explain, for example, opening the southern border? Right, there's a good one. People say, "Oh, it's to get more votes." I go, "No, you just rig the machines. You don't need to open the southern border to get workers. They're not skilled workers." That was not a good argument. The Mexicans, that was a very stable situation. The Mexicans would come across. They weren't committing crimes. Everything worked fine. We did not need to do the wholesale border opening that we did. That looked like it was an attempt to destroy something. Right, that was a very destructive move, and Europe did it too. That's where I first started watching. Sweden is now. I was on a Zoom call with a parliamentarian in Sweden, and I asked her. I said, "We're getting information. I want to confirm or have you refute it that Sweden is now the most dangerous country in Europe." She said that is correct. Sweden, right? I would have said Sweden is the most safe country in Europe, but not anymore. There's all sorts of no-go zones that you can't go there. The cops can't go there. No one can go there, and it's all because they opened their borders, open arms, and the authorities had to know. They couldn't possibly have thought bringing in North Africans into Sweden was a win. There's no chance that was a win. It's just way too complicated. It's like if Japan all of a sudden started bringing in Afghans. How much sense would that make? Right? It wouldn't make no sense. One of the things that keeps Japan in order is they're ethnically homogeneous. Right? So they have a shared belief system. They have a shared origin story. Their diversity is strength. That turns out not to be true. It's true at some level, but it also is a very destabilizing thing. And so, you know what? That's why people form ghettos, right? The Italian ghettos in New York City. I think it was a stabilizing force. You know, that's why presumably the Somalis all went to Minnesota for some reason. Certainly not the weather. So yeah. And then when I started digging deeper and deeper, it just got weirder and weirder. And now I'm not even sure I know. I don't feel I'm any closer to knowing what role it played. So Epstein, I'd overrated the honey trap model. I think Epstein was much more of a deal maker, much higher level, supranational. Epstein was working above the sovereign state level, in my opinion, and I think he was providing. His job was to figure out what people needed and wanted, and to satisfy those as a social lubricating thing. And yes, he had videos, and yes, he could blackmail. But you know, if you knew the guy was blackmailing people rather than being a positive force in their life, I don't mean positive in terms of good, but positive in terms of getting what they want, they wouldn't talk to him. It would quickly get out, say, "Don't go near Epstein. Nothing but pain and suffering will come of that. Don't go near Epstein," right? And you know, some guys say the same about Diddy in Hollywood. Don't go to a Diddy party, right? But Epstein did favors for people. I'm guessing Epstein was involved in putting Melania and Donald together. It's not a horrible outcome. She's been a pretty good first lady. She's hot. He's rich. Seems like kind of a marriage made in heaven right there. So I think Epstein made tremendous deals. I think the Epstein files show that, but they also are redacted up the kazoo, which shows they're hiding a tremendous amount. And they just fired Bondi. You see that?
I saw that. I had that pulled up here. Yep. I have that Wall Street Journal up right now.
Loyalty to Trump does not protect you, does not protect your job security, right? He'll throw you under the bus fast. You know, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Bondi, they were real foot soldiers for him.
Kristi Noem.
Kristi Noem.
Yep.
Yeah.
Could be Hegseth next.
I would be shocked if Hegseth wasn't gone soon. Could be Kash Patel.
You saw the photos coming out of Cash, this supposed
Dancing
leak.
around. Yeah.
Dan Bongino, what are I'd love to hear your take on him, because this guy is now he's back doing his podcast again.
But he's different. So the funny thing about the Patel videos was that they came from Iranian hackers, but they hacked Israel to get the films. Oh God! So they got to hack Israel to get footage of our guys. And Bongino is mystifying to a higher order, because I would have figured that. I thought Bongino looked like a hostage crisis video to me. I mean, I thought he just hated what he was being asked to do. But since leaving, he has been nothing but batshit crazy, and he's been nothing but ridiculously off target, in my opinion. And so I expected him to come back and say, look, here's what happened. Here's what I couldn't do. In fact, when the Epstein files didn't get leaked, the shit they leaked was already public knowledge. It was sub-public knowledge, right? It wasn't even as good as what, Nick Bryant could have run circles around them with what he knows alone. And Bondi pretended like she got duped. I go, no, you didn't get duped. You thought you could get away. You're so clueless. You thought that a notebook would be adequate for the public to consider the Epstein files released, right? A notebook. But I would have thought these guys, I thought Bongino would be sort of loyal, pro-America. I thought we'd see kind of a Joe Kent moment, even though there's people questioning Joe Kent's motives now. But I think that could be people who are trying to undermine him. So they're trying to put the earworm into our head saying, don't trust Joe Kent. I don't know. But it wouldn't shock me if he was some limited hangout. I just, nothing would shock me at this point, as long as it doesn't defy the laws of physics.
What about Thomas Massie?
I still trust Thomas Massie. I think there's things he didn't say that he could have. I think he knew more than he said. But that's statecraft, right? That's I got a cameo that, the Thomas Massie money bomb, that video, the money bomb. There was a Thomas Massie money bomb that was put out, much like Ron Paul's money bomb back in 2008 when he ran, and was really having an effect. I was a huge Ron Paul fan. I was an endorser on Ron Paul's homepage of his presidential run. Lou Rockwell got my quote put up there. And so I was a huge Ron Paul fan. So I'm right up there with Dave Smith. And Thomas Massie, there's a money bomb thing where they show various people supporting Massie and saying things, and I got a cameo in it. When I did the Tucker interview, Tucker said, if you don't support Thomas Massie, and then they swing over to me and I said, you're the problem. And so that was funny.
Some have said that Massie is, I think, if I'm not mistaken, he's part of some Masonic lodge, or at the very least that he was brought up or inculcated at an early age in the Demolition organization, which of course
I'd have to see hard data, just because if not, someone people don't understand the support for Trump, which I'm has seriously been undermined in me. I mean, I'm anti-war for starters. And so his participation in the Iranian war is a big problem, but the other things are problematic too. And so I'm beginning to think we're not going to get shit out of this guy. The reason people weren't putting their sanity on Trump because he was such a great hope, but rather a sense that he is our last hope. And that if not Trump, then who? Because he's the only guy who could be the human wrecking ball to take down a corrupt system. And now it's not looking like he's gonna. And so there's this now who's gonna, J.D. Vance? I don't think so. Who's gonna do it?
I think people thought Trump, some people thought Trump to be like the Cincinnati character. in a sense, where he's going to go in there, he's going to clean house, he's going to do his thing, and then when his term is over, he's done. And I think, and I'll say this is, and this is someone who used to buy into left-right paradigms and who used to believe that voting made a difference, which I no longer subscribe to anymore, at least at the higher level of voting, and that Trump served this purpose to galvanize, to get people rallied together. That he postured himself as this anti-establishment figure, which has been everything, obviously everything about that, and that. Excuse me, and then the assassinations that have happened and all of these other events.
Do you believe the first one was a real attempt or not?
Probably theater. If that sounds bad or what? I mean, I've brought people on where they've talked about the cartilage in his ear, and other things that are intact. And I mean, sure, there's plastic surgery and all. There's just, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised between the Vegas and then I won't say, but the last part of it, Hook incident that happened years ago. I'm now having to speak more cryptically on the show.
Yeah, Hook. We'll just call it Hook.
Yeah,
the Hook School. The Hook School. And I was a believer that it was an attempt, but now I'm doubting. And the second one was farcically stupid looking. It was the whole Ryan Ruth thing was a complete kayfabe. Never bought that one. Ryan Ruth was way too weird, way too visible, way too many different roles in his life. Everything was wrong about that one. So I should have thought, okay, therefore the first one was wrong too. It took me a long time to begin to doubt. Now, I'm sort of agnostic on whether I think it was faked or not, but I'm much more open to the idea than I used to be.
So okay, so let me let me just circle back real quick here, as it relates to Massie. And this is just one side. I just want to bring it to light more. Again, I personally, I like the ideas that I hear him espouse, Massie.
It's true when you have a guy like that, right?
Yeah, and especially APAC, which I just saw. I'm looking at my notes here that there's an APAC investigation going on. I mean, I don't know how real that is or not, apparently, but Demolition is an organization with ties to the Vatican, basically. And one mental model of the world is that's who is, let's create this, theater and divide people, this controlled opposition. And I had a guest on named Drew Treglia. He created the film Jonestown, and he said, I'm paraphrasing him, basically like we're all the Ron Pauls of the world, Rand Paul and Massie. Hey, why not just say it, call the system for what it is, that you have that it is theater, that they are all actors more or less, and that there is a transnational clique that is running the show, that is a-religious, and so that's one angle. I'd like to hear your take on that.
Well, I think there could be some guys who really do oppose it, but they're kept in check enough that they're not relevant. So Ron Paul was, in his views of the world, was consistent for about 20 straight years. You can show footage of Ron Paul, and he was saying 20 years ago what he said 20 years earlier than he said in his retiring year. And so I think Ron Paul was legitimate. Massie did hold back on some information, in my opinion, but I'm going to hope he's legitimate. I think Marjorie Taylor Greene, at some level, was legitimate, but as a foot soldier for Trump, she had to know shit that she was ignoring, right? The Trump problem is also that, and again, you don't know if you're being duped by propaganda, but the evidence that Trump family has benefited enormously from the presidency is disquieting, right? Because that would be toxic for a person who's trying to change the course of the country. That would be hands off, don't do this. You'll ruin my dream of making this place a better place. And somehow, releasing cryptocurrency, and there's just so many times. And I just read Jared Kushner's father just got pardoned. Well, that's kind of like, hey, Donald, could you, I know I'm only your brother-in-law, but could you pardon my father? Yeah, that makes sense to me. When Biden pardoned all of his buddies, what a shock, right? Well, he pardoned his son. And they say, oh, did he promise he would? They go, did you really believe that? Are you that stupid? Put it this way, if I had a son in jail and I didn't pardon him, I wouldn't be able to go home to my wife. She'd kill me. So I don't blame Biden for pardoning Hunter. Jesus Christ. But so I'm hoping Massie's real. But if he's not, it will be totally consistent with the kayfabe model.
Well, you mentioned about, obviously this administration's making hand over fist. I mean, I had on Courtney Turner. I don't know if you're how familiar with her, but she's mentioned that they stand to make just a absolute fortune. And it's pretty diabolical, the stuff that I've heard from Kushner, as far as the smart city that he wants to build, and the $5 billion that he's looking to raise in his speech at Davos. And it says this is the Chabad Lubavitch element there, which I hear permeates Putin's administration and the Iranian one. I hear that there is a
when they
there's a
started
wrinkle there.
mentioning turning it into a resort, that didn't sell well.
Yeah, we're going to be on the beaches, and this is where they bulldozed
and
bunch of
how
bodies.
have they justified bombing Lebanon? Can you tell me that? Because I haven't been able to see a justification of bombing Lebanon. What's that about? Besides, they're talking about displacing 600,000 Lebanese.
Sounds about right for the Agenda 2030 crowd.
Right, but this is happening. Maybe Gaza is just noise, so that they can actually take land from Lebanon instead. Right? Who knows? All I know is that they're not hiding it well. Maybe they don't care. Maybe it's called a guy named Adam Curtis called it hypernormalization, where you just throw up your hands and say it is what it is. We can't change it. It's a name that was first coined in reference to the Soviet Union and what it was like to live in the Soviet Union. And they, one of these, they pretend to pay us, and we pretend to work.
Well, it's also kind of like this Overton window. COVID was that great. Hey, let's just kind of give them a taste. Let's test it out. Okay, now let's do this. I mean, they know obviously what they're doing with this whole Middle East affair, this Iran war, and the massive energy shock that's producing currently, and the ripple effects which will last for years, even if the war were to wrap up immediately.
So that's the question that again, this morning I was on a 4-way podcast. I try not to double down, but it's gotten impossible not to. Have we reached the point, are we past the fail-safe point where, let's say, everything resolved brilliantly quickly, which is a problem because supposedly the guys that Trump's supposedly negotiating with, the Israelis are supposedly trying to kill, right? And so the Israelis clearly do not want resolution. But if, let's say, they resolved it, are we already to the point where there's going to be, starvation in parts of the world because of lack of fertilizer? And, are we already at the point where there's going to be shortages of various fossil fuels and things like that? Do you think we're there? Do you think we're already at have we already triggered bad events, even if it resolved quickly from here?
Is that a question, or are you?
That's a question.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah, I think it's already happening right now. I think that we are in a World War III. We have the 4th and 5th generation warfare going on. 4th, if I'm not mistaken, is the terrorism element that was in the 90s and plus or minus around there. 5th generation with information warfare. I've said on other episodes, I think this is like the 1930s, where you saw nations making powers. Obviously, in the 1930s, we had a lot of major economic fallout. We saw the rise of ultranationalism, of course, in Japan, in Germany, and Italy, and I think Latin America as well. I think that was Juan Perón era. I mean, or a little before Juan Perón, but a myriad of different things going on. And I think that this is serving in that agenda. I think we could very, very realistically, and I actually have some clips here that I'd like to show too. I've saved for us that energy lockdowns and what's going on over in Australia right now. Let me just play the clip here real quick here. I'm gonna pull it up here real quick.
So a woman named Jojo something was talking about the Australian grid being a mess.
Yeah.
Years ago, she said it. Go
My
ahead.
gosh.
You should go about your business and your life as normal. Enjoy your Easter. And if you're hitting the road, don't take more fuel than you need. Just fill up like you normally would. Think of others in your community, in the bush, and in critical industries. And over coming weeks, if you can switch to catching the train or bus or tram to work, do so. That builds our reserves and it saves fuel for people who have no choice but to drive. Farmers and miners and tradies who need diesel every single day. And all those shift workers and nurses who do so much for our country. You should go about your...
Okay, I just thought I'd share that. That's one of many videos that I have to share. But go ahead.
So Australia, despite being the largest coal producer, has dismantled all their power plants to the point that, so what people don't understand is that alternative energies have to be fed into a grid that has an inherent frequency. And it's not a frequency like the sun's out, or it's not that frequency. It's a megahertz sort of frequency. And so if you've got some big rotor at Niagara Falls, it's whizzing around the same rate all the time. So it's an incredibly stable frequency. Same thing is true with nuclear power, things like that. If you try to feed alternative energy in the grid, it can only take so much before you really have to start jerry-rigging it, or you will disrupt that frequency. And Australia got to that point. So they produce all this coal and they sell it abroad. They sell it to China. And meanwhile, their grid is caving in. And so they had an incident where an aluminum smelter lost power and the whole thing froze up. And, you know, one thing I know is if you got aluminum flowing through various channels and all of a sudden it cools off, you got a big problem. And Australia during COVID was about as Nazi-like as you can get. I hate to use that word. I'd use something a little less inflammatory. Was about as authoritarian as you can get during COVID. New Zealand and Australia and Canada. So the three places that historically, if someone said, you got to get out of the United States, where do you go? Those would have been my big three probably, right? And they all went super authoritarian during COVID. And I remember those Aussies, the guy standing up there talking about what they were going to do to you if you didn't behave. And I'm going, oh man, the Aussies have lost it.
Well, I had one of the top vocal critics of the lockdowns on not too long ago, and it was interesting to hear his take on it. He just said it was just draconian, the stuff that went on there. There was another clip that I had that I was showing. Are you familiar with Makia Freeman by chance? Okay, you got to check him out. He's got a site called the Freedom Articles, and he's covered the global Satanic network, and he also has a book that was completely banned on Amazon. It's called The Cult of the Chosen Ones. And I mean, they banned on like a number of, actually it was Amazon. It was another website called Lulu, completely abandoned it. Banned it. And so he's had a tough time. Now here's another interesting video I'll share with you too here real quick. Let me pull this up here. I'm getting in the habit here of doing these videos. Here we go.
I had a book blocked on Amazon because that
Really?
Epstein in the title.
Oh my gosh.
So many people did not believe me when I said we might go into a lockdown due to the situation in Iran, but now I've got proof. Check this out.
Is bringing state and territory leaders together again to finally find an answer to the fuel crisis. Some drastic measures similar to the days of COVID could be on the table as the government braces for a worst-case scenario.
Questions fly about fuel supply.
The anxiety levels are as high as I've seen, maybe with some even higher than COVID.
The further measures they will consider based on the International Energy Agency's plan, encouraging 3 days work from home, 10 kilometres per hour lower speed limits, encouraging public transport and carpooling, and odd and evens number plate days in cities.
We are on the 1 yard line of this whole situation. This is like February of 2020, right before we went into lockdowns in March when the whole COVID disaster happened. You need to be prepared. I would start stocking up on things before things start running out or going up in price to the point where they are unaffordable.
Okay. Some things are tough to plan for though, like medicines. My wife is on a lot of meds. And if they get shut off, it's not like you can take vitamins instead, right?
Well, I've heard major pharmaceutical, pharmaceutical drugs have been hit. There was one that was hit over in Israel, if I'm not mistaken. It's a big one in the world. And in other parts, apart from the refineries being hit, a lot of, I'm forgetting the term where it's like they process stuff just over in Europe, North America. And then we've had incidences go on here, of course, with Port Arthur over in Texas. And so,
yeah, what was that on? That it made it sound like it was just, oh yeah, just another fire. And I'm going, yeah, what a coincidence, right?
Yeah,
I have this worldview, by the way, of Iran. It's real simple. It's a game theory. I put out on Twitter, and of course, you can imagine the hate that appeared. Where I think Iran has to bring the global economy to its knees this time. The reason is because what they really need to do is to show that they have the ability to do it. And then when we finally reopen the strait and everything sort of works its way back to normal, the next time Israel says, let's try to destroy Iran again, the rest of the world will say, get back on your home turf. Do not attack them. We're not putting up with that shit again. I think that, so the question is who's winning? Definition of winning is very different for the two sides. Iran surviving while causing the damage is a win, period.
Well, and Iran being a several thousand-year-old people, a nation. Yeah, it's I know a lot of people who are Iranian. I mean, I used to live in Orange County, California, and there's a lot of Iranians there. And I'm not dismissing killings or things that have gone on by the regime. I think all these governments are incredibly corrupt. They don't serve us, and so. But I think just doing that is going to create problems. I saw this article. I just started reading this Hal Turner. Obviously, I'm sure you're familiar with him. I don't know what your take is on him. I've been kind of looking at different articles, and actually Bob Moriarty said, check this out. So I'm looking at it. But
did you interview Moriarty?
So what's up?
Did you interview Moriarty?
Oh, I've had him on several times.
Yeah, he's such a cranky old bastard. He's great. Yeah. I did a three-way with him finally.
Oh, yeah. He's great. But you got to connect with Max Lowen and probably Jason Christoff. I think he'd be a good one. And if you're not familiar,
I've been on some Zoom calls with Jason.
Okay. Yeah. Well, here, I'll read to you what this one article says. It says, this was today, world hits sell button after Trump addresses to the nation. World listened to President Trump's speech Wednesday evening and hit the sell button. Asian markets creating overnight. Japan down, South Korea, oil surging back up over 105. Gold and silver collapsing as safe havens. Gasoline's over $4. Over here where I'm at, it's about it's over $6. And in 4 hours south of me in LA, it's over $7. And
so the gold silver collapse is interesting. The best argument I've heard, since it should not be collapsing as a safe haven. Right? As a safe haven, that should be where the money's flowing. I think it's collapsing because there are big players who have to sell it.
Yes.
To pay some bills. And I'm not sure what the bills are. But as someone said, if you're short oil, and you've got a tanker full somehow, who knows what, you could be really pinched by this thing if you didn't see it coming. And so that means that long-term gold's still a very bullish bet, because the current sell-off is people who are forced sellers.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I've heard some of the Gulf states that they've needed to do that, and that drove the price down. And then here's another part. The energy shock is spreading beyond fuel into aluminum, fertilizer, helium, which we're hearing more about in the semiconductor supply chain. Boy, a lot of ripple effects, and then also the jobs here. Here's another thing. I know I'm bouncing around. Feel free to jump in if you'd like. There's a number of topics I'm trying to hit here while I have you on here. Let me pull her up here.
So my husband's old boss just sent him a text message to let him know that Oracle just laid off 20,000 employees. 20,000 employees. It's getting worse. And now there's going to be 20,000 new additional people looking for a software engineering job. in a field where there seems to be no more jobs left. 20,000 people are now going to be fighting it out to try and get a job in a field where AI is basically taking over. This is scary. So my husband still doesn't have a job. He has been trying to find jobs, has had plenty of interviews, has done plenty of tests, immediately gets a rejection letter shortly after doing whatever tech stack he has to do. But now there's 20,000 more people looking for a job. Oracle just let go of 20,000 people. That's insane.
So the Oracle's a complicated story because they are using vast amounts of debt to do the AI story. Their credit default swaps have been soaring, so the marketplace is putting a serious risk on them defaulting on the debt. And so I don't think Oracle's dumping jobs because AI doesn't need workers anymore, but rather because Oracle's in big, big trouble. Now, she's correct. Is my understanding she's correct that the software jobs market sucks in a world that seems to be purely digital. So you're going, okay, that's a bit of a paradox. I think the AI bubble is probably bursting. I think the private credit market unambiguously has burst, but is not yet done spewing shit all over everybody. So it's like a slow-mo. You ever seen the video of a water balloon getting, poked with a pin in real slow motion? Well, the pin has now perforated the private credit bubble, and that therefore is going to cause trouble in private equity, which puts some banks at risk because private equity gets their money from somebody, and usually a bank's in there somewhere, since I don't think they're using S&H green stamps to do it. So I believe if private equity goes, if private credit goes, if AI goes, if oil soars, right? This is a pretty ugly setup, and the markets right now are priced. I hate to say to perfection, because perfect markets don't price like this. The markets are, crudely speaking, 200% over historical average valuation. That is a market that has no shock absorbers in it. And so the collapse in the markets will not be caused by these various events. They are triggers. The collapse in the markets will be caused by them being priced wrong, just horrifically poorly priced. In real estate, okay, let's go to real estate. Commercial real estate, residential real estate. There's just bubbles everywhere. There's life insurers who are going to go belly up, and therefore annuities are not going to get paid. I think. I mean, I could be blowing smoke. You and I were just stuck with the internet, right?
Well, I mean, you look at insurance premiums. I mean, how much those have gone up. I mean, it's just crazy. And then circling back to, I think I just lost it here. Damn it. I had it up. It was Luke Groman and Professor Werner speaking at Patrick David's show, and I thought that was an interesting thing.
Groman's getting around very well. He also was on Tucker. Patrick Bet David is a big interview.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Luke and Glenn Greenwald and Jay Martin did a three-way that I thought was a really compelling interview.
Yeah, I'll give a shout out to Metals and Miners. I think you've been on Gary's show.
Gary's a great interviewer too.
He's very good. He's very good. He actually was kind enough. He invited me on, and I was like, oh yeah, I want to prep a bit more before I go on your show.
Oh, he runs it well though. You can wing that. You can wing that. Gary makes sure it doesn't bomb.
He's great. He's great.
He's one of the most well-prepared interviewers, without it feeling stiff. They're not canned questions. He just somehow knows where to take it.
I have actually learned from him. I've had critics say, well, you need to go in way more prepared in these interviews. And candidly, I probably should do a better job.
Get too stiff though. That can get too stiff. Gary pulls it off, but most people who try to do that do a bad job.
I try and make it organic. Like I'm just having a conversation with someone. I'm just shooting the shit. It's not like this like studio. I don't have all these editors or all these. I'm not like some of these. That's where I feel like also, by the way, you can tell with some of these commentators that you see on Rumble or on YouTube when they have these high gloss studios and these massive production. Like, come on, those numbers are getting pumped up. You know, candidly, with this show, I'm for sure been censored. I've covered a lot of topics people will not cover. And I'm not, that's not me like tooting my own horn. I'm just like, I unwittingly went into some of these topics. And so
like I dragged you into some of them. Yes.
No, sometimes I lament it. No, not you. Cause it's like I said before, you know, if you do a show and I'll just say this to people, if you can do a show, even if you just do one episode a week, it'll probably change your life. Like completely. And I don't say that just out of hyperbole. There's a number of things. Damn, I was going to bring up that clip, but that's okay. Another thing as it relates to AI, I wanted to bring up, Claude is now running TradingView live from the terminal. Okay. I've been trying to educate myself more, and I was.
What's TradingView? What is TradingView?
TradingView, I guess I guess it's a platform that allows you to trade on there or something to that capacity. I'm not intimately familiar with it, but
it's about markets then. So Claude is running some sort of AI-based market.
That's correct, and I'm seeing on X that it is a threat to traders.
Well, here's an interesting thing. Someone took handwritten digits from 0 to 9. I think it was Charles Ortel, maybe. In any event, Charles Hugh Smith, I think, and he iteratively, recursively put it through an AI program, and it slowly mutated with each cycle, and they converged on a single digit that was garbled. So they all turned into the same digit. And what it shows is that as you feed AI slop into AI, you get more slop and more slop and more slop. Now, what are modern markets? They are recursively adding digital slop, which is then using the digital slop to produce more digital slop. The markets are all just computers recursively generating views on price discovery. And it's just digital slop. But at some point, I have this great faith that either you will own assets that are priced so wrong, it's like owning a $200,000 Toyota Corolla, or the free market's going to find a way to discover price. It's going to recursively go the other way.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll also add, as far as the challenges, being exerted on people. Obviously, we're seeing more and more people having to go to more extremes to provide for themselves. I mentioned on other shows. I mean, obviously, people, whether it was selling plasma, which hey, if you need money, like, that's not a bad idea. A plasma, to people having to live in RVs. Which, I mean, there's some nice RVs. I'm not knocking RVs, but
yeah, I know, but right.
I mean, but or having to room up or do different things. Again, not knocking that. You got to do. I mean, obviously these are all indicators, and then a lot of Gen Z and millennials going to the sports betting. People, there was just a person at the university not far from me. He bet his whole, I don't know, his life savings, or he put down just several thousands of dollars, and he has an addiction. They did a news segment on. I haven't watched the whole thing. I should say. But people are trying to find these alternative vehicles because they just feel checked out, disenfranchised, and I mean,
I watched an interview of Chris Williamson, who's, I think, is a very good interviewer. And he's not just good at questioning, but he also comes in with more knowledge than you would expect. He interviewed a woman named Deborah So on malfunctioning sexual habits. So she wrote a book called Sextinction, I think it's called. I ordered it because I love the hunter-gatherer model of humans. So I was a genetics major as undergrad, and I liked evolution. And so I like guys like Brett Weinstein who talk about humans as hunter-gatherers, and evolutionarily speaking. And they were talking about the tremendous dysfunction going on in the world, and what are the various causes of it, including medications, including overwhelming porn, including demonizing young men. Actually, there's an interesting consequence of feminism which I hadn't thought of until pretty recently, and it was from another book I was listening to. I can't remember which one it was, but as women have elevated, the natural congenital misogyny of the human race, right? Men have been dominant, period. There's very, very few matriarchies that existed that didn't also involve men being gone and dead. And so when the men are off at war, there's matriarchies, but it's the exception. And there's a dominance thing. So the men are older than the women, the men are bigger than the women, and the men earn more than the women. And this is the way it's been since the dawn of civilization. Mm-hmm. Now the women have caught up. We've demonized the men, so now they even feel worse about themselves. Mm-hmm. And so they're not finding women naturally look for mates who are in this upper tier. Mm-hmm. And they don't want to admit it, but if you actually look at the data, that's what they do. Mm-hmm. And it turns out that the pickings are slim because the men are beaten down and earning less, and so there's far fewer mates that represent that step up that you want in a husband. You want the provider. This is biology. I'm not talking about the provider because you're a gold digger. It's biology. You're a hunter gatherer. You're looking for a hunter who's strong and powerful, will protect you and won't beat you. Right? That's a knife edge. That's a knife edge to find that guy. Some guy out of Game of Thrones who's good to you. That's hard to find. And they're finding it less and less possible now. And Adam Carolla did a great episode where he's talking about feminism in the typical Adam way. He said, basically his model is that you've now been given a say. You've now been provided sort of equal opportunity to talk. But basically, it's not a license to be an asshole.
Yeah.
And you think about it and you go, some of these liberal women are like, I want nothing to do with them. I just don't want to. They're not pleasant people.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And you think about it and you go, that's really true because we're congenitally born to want to pair up with nurturers. They're going to nurture our kids. They're going to nurture, right? This is how we evolved. And this toothy bitch, she's not mating material. Mm-hmm. And that's why one of my grad students said, you go on the dating sites and they're all liberal women. And the reason is because the ones who are not have been grabbed off the site and married.
Oh, it's appalling. I resigned from the dating apps, and I've always said, you need to go on there, you need to do this, blah blah blah, and I'm like, it's blue hair, and I see nose rings and fill in the blank, and not judging if people are into that. I'm just, just not my cup of tea. And yeah, I mean that's or you have the opposite where it's it's the princess. I have some notes here from Seth from Man in America. I took down. He had a video with somebody about the domestic and cultural demographic crisis. And in my notes, I had that U.S. fertility collapsed. Total fertility rate fell from 3.68 in 1957 peak to 1.63 in 2024. And historic low threatening population growth. A cultural shift. 1957 valued stay-at-home moms and large families. Today, motherhood devalued. Ties to biblical views on women's roles. Technological and legal changes. Now, from the 1960 to 79, birth control pills separated sex from protection. Roe vs. Wade, no-fault divorce. IVF fully severed marriage, sex, children link. Overturned centuries-old package deal in 60 years. I thought that was interesting. I thought I'd share that. Yeah.
Well, that's really, you just described what Deborah So and Chris Williamson talked about for 2 hours and why I bought the book, because I'm really in. Part of it's because I want to understand the kids I'm teaching, right? So I'm teaching 18 to 25-year-olds, basically, depending on the course. And I'm trying to understand like last year I had a course with 25 kids in it, and they were all the shy kid phenotype. They were all, and I'm going, how do you get 25 shy kids in one classroom? And especially a place like Cornell, where they're supposed to be former editor-in-chief of yearbooks and stuff from high school, right? We're not talking about shy and retiring kids in general historically. We're talking about the people who were admitted because they look like they might go and try to change the world. And and they were all shy. Now, good news is this year's a much livelier group. So maybe it's just an anomaly, but it was a 25 kid anomaly. And yeah, this year's better. Could be we're getting that much further from COVID and that much further from super woke, right? Super woke was just when I went through my annual reviews, all 17 volumes of them this year. I was stunned at how woke it was about 5 years ago. I was just stunned at all the things that I wrote about and the absurd things that were happening in society that I wrote about. I go, I'd totally forgotten how bad it was. And so society went off the rails. I mean, it was real witching hour. And if Trump did anything, he at least put an end to that, because his reelection was a knife right in the heart of the super woke. It was a clear message to society that some guy grabs the pussy, right? Some guy that society went with the alpha male.
Yeah, well, I'm finding that. So I'm in my early 30s, but I'm finding that those 10 years younger than me are, more awakened, if you will, more red pilled. They, whether it's following, the Fuenteses or the, Tates of the world, or it's, they just have a more masculine energy, I feel like. Actually, believe it or not, in some in certain circles that I'm observing, and that I think we're going to see a comeback to a society when they come of age, whereby people are not afraid to speak their mind. That people can be vulgar and they can joke. I've heard that from some people I've had on actually on the show.
I got a call from a high school principal who's calling about a reference to hire a woman to teach. And I just couldn't pass on the opportunity. I said, I got some questions for you. And we must have spoken for an hour. He got to the end. He said, this is the most interesting reference call I've ever made. And I asked him about it. And basically, he confirmed that it's no longer cool to be transgender. It's no longer, he says, it's just that whole 3 standard deviation perturbation that occurred back around 2020-ish is now subsiding.
Yeah,
which is good news. Which is good news.
Absolutely. Oh yeah.
They're getting more religious too. The rise of religion. And I'm not a practicing religious person, but I've actually written in support of religion when I realized that I was benefiting from the existence of religion, even though I didn't practice it. Because if you have a rules-based system, what happens when no one's moral enough to follow the rules? Mm-hmm. So you really need an ethos. You really need, it doesn't hurt to have everyone get together on Sunday morning and hear about why you should behave yourself, right? 100%. In church. And I had this bias because of rumors of, hurting scientists who tried to tell them that the earth was not the center of the universe and things like that. And I realized also that scientists can be total assholes. And probably the ones who got in trouble were the ones who flaunted it, right? Instead of saying, look, here's what I've learned. God's even greater than we thought. And the Pope would have said, that's fine, right? But they probably threw it in the face of the religious guys. And it's like, okay, now we got to deal with you. And the clergy protected the peasants against the elites, against the nobles, by saying, look, you keep misbehaving, this is what hell looks like, don't go there. And so the history of Catholicism, medieval history is very different than what we were often taught, which I find a riveting period in history. The 476 to 1200 period, to me, is just fascinating. So,
it's a lot of people don't realize the pagan and other non-monotheistic or what have you religions or beliefs that were incorporated into Christianity. I mean, it is very fascinating. There's a lot of parallels with other different things there. Not to go open that can of worms for some people in the audience, but also, that is a very fascinating period. What was I going to comment on? I have noticed that people have become more religious. I have become more religious, especially doing the show.
Well, I'm not more religious, but I'm getting closer because I don't think I'll ever go there. but I find myself, as soon as you start using the word evil, then the good and evil model starts creeping in, and that gets you pretty close to religion when you start talking about good versus evil, especially if you're reading about Satanism and stuff like that, right? If these guys are satanic, I'm going with the God-fearing guys, right? I'm gonna side with them. And people like Naomi Wolf, who's a limousine liberal turned into a gun-toting religious zealot, right? There's people who have, sort of looked into the abyss and come out of it more religious.
Yeah, I would say I think there's been a lot done to inculcate people that there is not a spiritual world, that things are materially based, that there's nothing beyond this life, in sort of thing. And I think there have been different agendas to obviously really push that. And I postulate that there's a whole nother dimension or dimensions that you're not aware of because it's beyond your faculty, maybe unless you're on drugs or something to access it. But I think there's definitely another worlds going on, whatever you want to call it, around you. And that kind of ties in with blanking out on the term, yeah, no, it's fascinating. Another thing I want to bring up here real quick. I was just looking at my notes here. This is going back to the geopolitical stuff. The whole Professor Zhang thing, I've seen him blow up. I mean, obviously there's some hidden hand there helping him out and controlled op or what have you. People have different opinions. What have you of him? I mean, he does make some interesting points, I think, and it resonates with people. The pizza index he mentioned about exploding, how more pizzas being consumed or purchased over in DC, and that some of these politicians that have, let's just call it unconventional late night late night activities.
Love
have
of
diminished.
pizza.
Well, the pizza and I mean actual pizza being consumed, not the code word pizza, but probably that too. but that these are signs that people are working later and later in the hours, that something's brewing more and more. As it relates to this ground
Well, that's
invasion.
the model. When the Gulf War blew out, some journalists got wind of the fact that the local pizza shops were being inundated with pizza orders being delivered to the Pentagon. And they realized, holy shit, we're going to start bombing tonight. So, Jean just came on my radar recently, so I can't bring a lot to that story, although I am now following him, which doesn't really help because my Twitter feed's a dumpster fire. But his views of the world have come on my radar enough for me to say, pay attention.
Well, he's been talking a lot about famine apparently for years. What are your thoughts? Do you see a big energy lockdown event arising?
Well, that's the question I've been asking as recently as this morning in my podcast. Have we committed ourselves to this day, even if we get our shit together, to famine in at least parts of the world? And the consensus seems to be yes. The consensus seems to be that fertilizer shortage at the beginning of the growing season is already committed to be a real phenomenon. And as a consequence, somewhere starting in the fall, there are going to be crops that are missing. And one of the things that you realize, people say, like, they'll talk about helium, they'll talk about fertilizer, and they say, well, they only provide 10%. I go, but the world figured out that that inventory costs money, and therefore they generated a just-in-time inventory economic model. So when you need something, you just order it, and the next day it shows up, and you don't have storage costs and things like that. That was Michael Dell and computers and everything, which means that you've introduced cost savings by increasing fragility. Mm-hmm. And a hyper dependence on the supply chains, which is why when Y2K came up, I paid very close attention, not because I knew the probability, but I knew the potential consequence. Nothing happened. It was a grift, it turns out, in my opinion. People say, no, it wasn't a grift. We fixed. I go, no, it wasn't, because the guys in Greece didn't fix. The guys in Portugal didn't fix. The guys in Venezuela, nothing blew up. Nothing blew up. But when COVID showed up, boom, my everything I'd learned from Y2K kicked right back in, and I was in the store fast because I knew the supply chain issue. If we are missing 10% of something, that means 10% of the consumers are going to have to do without it. We don't have access in most of the systems because access costs money, right? It's not like Oracle's producing extra software, and it's not, no one produces extra stuff. We produce it at exactly the rate that makes sense, and you don't all of a sudden ramp it up. In some cases you can. Some products you just say, okay, we'll just put on an extra shift tonight to make up the difference.
Absolutely.
But so I think we're going to have shortages of various kinds. I think energy, for example, I keep hearing that places like in Asia, Japan and Korea are most susceptible because they're most energy dependent, and they have not anticipated it. Whereas I think China anticipated it, probably has big stockpiles of coal, and they'll burn coal till they're blue in the face. The United States is pretty independent, but we're dependent on supply chains. And the guys who think Trump's going to solve that are ignoring a fundamental. It's going to be a multi-generational repair job of the supply chains. It took a half a century to lose these supply chains. It's not going to come back in a quarter or by the midterms or by the 2028 election. I just saw another thing where someone said they're going to build a new plant building such and such units in the United States worth $50 billion or something, right? And I go, they will not put a shovel in the ground with Trump in office. It takes way. I've been involved in renovating the chem building. See these shelves behind me? I'm in an empty space. It's not being used right now, but it's new. We renovate a floor. It takes 2 years for us to renovate a floor. From the point we said, okay, let's get started, planning, renovation, finishing, 2 years, right? So Apple can say they're going to build a plant in the United States, knowing full well that by the time they actually have to put up or shut up, Trump will, in the very least, be a lame duck. And they can say, oh, by the way, that design that fits perfectly into the site over in Korea again, right? So they can design a plant and decide where to put it depending on who's president.
Crazy. Well, to add to this whole shortage and other things going on, I actually have the clip here that I'll bring up and share here real quick. Here we go. This is Luke Groman, and Professor Werner should be on here too on PBD's podcast.
The world economy cannot survive a 7 to 11% loss of oil supply. It will not survive. We can debate, is Europe going to go first and collapse? Is Southeast Asia going to go first and collapse? Will America collapse first? But the global economy is a certainty. It will collapse if we keep oil supplies down.
What's the likelihood we go there and we stay there? What's the timeline? Like if we go to 7-11%, for how long?
Well, we've been there for 6 weeks. And I think if we get to mid-April, like you're already seeing flights. I just woke up this morning, a discount airline out of London Gatwick canceled all flights, can't get fuel. So now you're going to start having tourism fall.
You agree with
supply chains?
That's very true. It was announced in the UK that the last shipment of kerosene was just made this week, and there's no further known shipment arriving in the UK, which is pretty crazy. But it also tells you that this is a policy outcome because nobody seems to care. There's no countermeasures. There's alternative ways. There's things you could do if you wanted to. They don't. Why? Because this feeds into this other agenda that's ongoing and that we mustn't forget. We mustn't take our eyes off that. And that is, I've just explained sort of the background with the European Union. It's actually central planners wanting to centrally plan more and more. And it looks like they're going to use this opportunity to impose digital controls and the types of restrictions of individual freedoms that will be at least as bad as during this COVID psyop or worse.
Okay, I'll just stop it right there in case you wanted to comment on that.
Well, they're both very good at articulating ideas to the public. They're both. Werner's been particularly good through the years, but Groman has had a huge impact in this recent debate. And that was consistent with what I just said. 7% doesn't sound like a big number until you say 7% are not going to get it. right? And which 7%? That's like saying 7% of the people are going to die. Which 7%, right?
Mhm.
And so, but I keep cross-checking my assumptions by asking other people, saying, have we already committed ourselves to a problem? And it sounds like those two think so, because they're already citing. And apparently the big one is diesel. I just read a Barron's article that said the price of barrel is going to go up and why this is good news for inflation. I go, what kind of stupid headline is that? Who's driving that cab over there, right? What happened to Barron's? And so diesel apparently is the one that most influences the economy. And so and diesel's going to run short. And Luke, in other interviews, has cited some very specific numbers about this many days Japan runs out, this many days Korea runs out. Korea runs out of some of these things. NVIDIA doesn't make chips, right? If Korea can't get helium, $4 trillion of NVIDIA can't make chips, which, by the way, is this huge bubble anyways. A $4 trillion company selling it, I don't know, 30 times, 40 times revenues. What kind of crazy world? And their vendor financing, which is synonymous with fraud. And that's what Global Crossing did during the dot-com bubble, is they'd pay their vendors money to buy their chips, right? I had to pay to buy their broadband. Well, NVIDIA's been using vendor financing to pay not only people to buy their chips, but some of the companies buying their chips are not using their chips. They're just front companies. And then they use the chips as collateral to borrow more money. So it's just insanity. So NVIDIA will be selling for pennies on the dollar when this thing is finally wrung the excess out. There's that. The Mag 7, there will not be a Mag 7 5 years from now, in my opinion. We will be trying to forget the Mag 7. And by the way, one of the ways to think about this is the Mag 7 are a bunch of companies that were high profit margin, which tends to be a mean regressing collapse. Profit margins give way to efficiencies or arbitrage where other companies come in and take it away from you. So high profit margin companies, low capital expense companies, right? Apple doesn't have to put a lot of money into their software. They just sell the stuff. They're now high capex, low profit margin. They're more like Ford Motor Company now, and they're priced like they're not. They're priced like they're high profit margin. In fact, one of the disasters is to buy a company that's high profit margin and think that's good, even though it's going to collapse at some point, and therefore pay higher valuation for the company because it's high profit margin. You should pay a lower valuation for this high profit margin because it's an unstable profit. Real simple stuff.
Yeah. Wow.
And I posted a CAPE, which is the Case-Shiller PE. One of my favorite plots is the CAPE going back to 1870, 1880, I think it is. And for 110 years, it averaged 15, and it just channeled. It just flat as a pancake, in and out. Got expensive, got cheap, got expensive, got cheap for 110 years. And in the early 90s, it left the channel and never looked back. At the great financial crisis, it re-entered the channel for about a month. So what we thought was this catastrophic collapse of stock prices brought it back into the range of normal. And then it took off again. And some guy today said, why the hell do I care what happened back in 1880? And I go, 1880 to 1990. It's 110 years of baseline to establish what's normal. And then in 1990, it left normal. That should scare the shit out of people. Because we're now priced with a Case-Shiller PE of 40. Used to be 15. If we collapse to 15, we're talking 70% correction. How do you think the boomers are going to like that? When their entire portfolio, when you take a 70% correction in your retirement portfolio, you just took a 70% pay cut for the rest of your life. That's a big pay cut.
That's going to go over like a lead balloon.
Like, and here's the thing that really bothers me is that we're at a top. Let's say we're at a top. Let's hypothetically, Dave's right. It's not been right, but someday I will be right. The broken clock we'll call the time correctly. Normally at tops, like think of the .com top. We were euphoric. The world had changed. Netscape had arrived, right? Everything, the digital world was here. It was just going to be transformational. 1967, the transistor had shown up, right? 1929, we had invented electricity and telephones, and in the 20s, they were tapping phone calls. I mean, it was technologically moving. The 30s were a great period of invention, it turned out. The best decade of secondary inventions, appliances, things like that. We were euphoric, right? The roaring 20s was called roaring because we were euphoric. It was a gilded age. And now we're at the top and everyone's grumpy as shit. Everyone's pissed off at something. What are they going to be acting like when we're 70% lower?
It's going to be Planet of the Apes.
Planet of the Apes. That's what you're right. A Road Warrior, Mel Gibson starring, Bartertown.
Or as I said on another episode with Charles Heston eating the green food or whatever, the human.
Right.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I'll just give my commentary on what I think. I think that this whole recession thing is obviously long overdue. I think that this is a controlled demolition, to borrow Jeff Berwick.
Who just got appointed as Fed chair? Who's going to be appointed?
I'm blanking on that guy's name.
Kevin Warsh.
Yep.
So Trump said he was going to promote some bitch into the job who would just print and drop rates and just do that all over again. And he goes and finds the most hawkish ex-Fed head of the last 15 years. The most hawkish. The guy who said, Greenspan blew it, Bernanke blew it, we should have done that, we shouldn't have intervened, we should have let the market solve it. And that's who Trump puts in the job. Makes you wonder what his marching orders are going to be. And I think they're going to be, your job is to usher this thing down into the valley of death.
To control demolition. I think that's really the
controlled demolition.
It's all engineered. I do find it interesting when I talk to people when they talk about, it's just incompetence. It's these people. It's like, no. Maybe the public facing puppets are incompetent, but these people are controlled. The people that run the world, this clique cabal, whether they're factions, they know what they're doing. These people are not stupid. They've been doing this for millennia plus. It's pretty.
So Hanlon's razor says, don't chalk up to nefarious what could just be explained as incompetence. Collum's razors, Hanlon works for the CIA.
Yeah. Well,
Hanlon's bullshit.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of, the whole, I don't know how far you've gone down, like the different bloodline families, they talk, over in Rome and in some of these, and that's
Belgium, the royal family.
And I guess some of these families even go back to antiquity.
Mm-hmm. That's why Europe has a bigger pedophile trafficking problem than the United States, because they have the royal lineages. Oh, web-toed whack jobs.
Blue bloods.
That's right. I think the entire royal family screwed up beyond comprehension. The Belgians have terrible problem. Yeah, I think the Eyes Wide Shut, the movie, I call it fictionalizing reality. Hollywood's job is to take something that's true, make a movie so that we think it's fiction.
Mm-hmm.
So, like Born Identity is dead on MK Ultra, right? So you mention MK Ultra, something, they, that's Born Identity, and therefore they've anchored to a fictional plotline, and so that undermines it. And it turns out Eyes Wide Shut, the satanic cult, Tom Cruise, they filmed it in a castle owned by the Rothschilds where they used to do satanic shit. How weird is that? What was it? Kubrick made it, had total authority over the script, supposedly. And he got into a clash with someone over what would be in that movie, and he died 3 weeks later.
Well,
What's that all about?
Yeah, well, I heard Tom Cruise is has black nobility blood, and he married.
Scientology.
Yeah, and he married Katie Holmes in a castle that is part of that family. Yeah, it's. I've also heard with DNA testing, that's been another topic. Is what the 23andMe, if that even still exists anymore, or is
it went bankrupt and got sold to someone, probably Larry Ellison or something.
And now they have people's DNA, and they can see whose bloodline is this.
But let me point out the obvious. If the authorities want our DNA, I mean, we all get blood tests done all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So all you have to do is buy LabCorp of America or something, which does all the blood tests, and say, by the way, do a DNA run on this guy while you're at it.
That's right. And it's crazy how they can take your DNA and clone you, if I'm not mistaken, or they can.
I hear that. They did it to a sheep, so maybe they could do it to us. I hear rumors of this. I hear people who want to clone themselves. Epstein supposedly wanted to clone himself. Can't tell how much of that's true, how much of it's not. Mm-hmm. But I do believe that the tech to clone you. Did you see they were talking about cloning headless humans, just a brainstem?
No.
For organ harvesting.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm going, it's some twisted way. I understand the logic, but I think that's a Rubicon you never want to cross, right? That's just too sick and twisted and stuff like that. And so I posted that, and then below it I posted the famous Mike the Chicken, who was made famous in the 40s when his owner lopped off his head with a machete of some kind to kill him, and Mike didn't die. And so Mike had just enough brainstem to keep his autonomic system going. And the owner got stinking rich. He was making like $4,500 a month doing shows with Mike the Chicken. He fed him through the hole in his, so Mike had just enough brainstem to keep the heart pumping, to keep the muscles moving. And search Mike the Chicken. It's
I'm gonna have to look it up.
Yeah, Mike the Chicken. I think it's Mike the Chicken. And then after 18 months, Mike died. But it was I'm not even sure why he died. Oh, I think he aspirated his feed.
My gosh.
Something like that. Can you boot up Mike the Chicken? Show a picture?
Yeah. Here, let me get this.
There's no videos of Mike. I went looking for a long time, looking to see how Mike functioned. And I can't find videos of Mike.
Sure. Let me pull this up here. Share screen. Share. Okay. Yep. There's
Mike. Look at the far right. Look at the far right. He's holding up Mike's head.
Oh my gosh.
And that supposedly is real. That's been around. I knew about Mike about 10 years ago, so it's not an AI. And then if I go to Twitter.
Wow.
Right. So in theory, a headless person is doable.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping it's not.
Wow.
I'm looking for videos of Mike the Headless Chicken, because I'd like to see how Mike moves. I want to see the dynamics of Mike, not just a stationary image.
Mm-hmm.
According to this, it says no authentic original video footage exists in the public domain or widely available online. Photographs, including one from Life magazine, showing Mike dancing or standing. He was fed with an eyedropper.
Yeah.
No videos of Mike. Here are some notable examples available. Music videos by the. So there's a bunch of documentaries about Mike, but they always show Mike in a static form.
Crazy
which
stuff.
Is such a shame. That would have been worth catching.
Well, I think we're in for a wild ride here with technology and what it's going to be able to produce. I'm trying to learn more about OpenClaw. I'm actually working on that when we're done
What's
here.
OpenClaw? What's that?
Yeah, OpenClaw is basically an AI program that is basically your assistant, and you connect it with either OpenAI, Claude, or Anthropic. I'm new to this, so I'm learning. But basically, it's an assistant that can do work for you, and people have been deploying it. And there was a kid that made $30,000 helping businesses set it up at 15 years of age. And and then there's also this localized version, which you are probably familiar with AI, where it's divorced from the internet. You don't need the internet in order to use your AI assistant.
Put it on your computer.
Yes, and that.
But doesn't it use the computer? Doesn't it use the internet as its source material? How does it do that?
I don't. I'd have to look into it, but you're not, from my understanding, you're not dependent upon the cloud. Right. And so, but it's a little bit behind from what I've heard. There's a little bit of a lag effect in terms of, right. Because if you want to get the highest in AI supercomputing power, you're going to pay big bucks and you're going to have to go through the cloud. Obviously, the cloud has challenges because of, lag, privacy. They're harvesting all our data, and they can also downgrade it and, tinker with stuff. But having custody of it obviously negates that, but it's not as good. But some people are spending, like NVIDIA's got a product that's $100,000. I heard it's like a computer that is for people that want to use it for AI purposes, $100,000. And there's some that are a little more economical, though out of reach for most people, which is $4,000 for a type of computer that can handle that. But I think we're going to continue to see a drive, and I think it's going to force people. I've shared with you my story, Dave, where I've done a myriad of different things, like a lot of different, like just trying this out, trying that out, trying that, and does this work? Does that work? And I was basically forced into podcasting. I was forced into doing other entrepreneurial things because I couldn't find that, commercial real estate.
But as I recall, you do have a job. You do have a paycheck.
No. I'm full on entrepreneur.
Really?
No more. Yeah,
Okay.
I dropped a lot of the other things. Yeah, I'm rolling out this TV app nationwide, and then the show, and then now I'm working on some AI business I'm going to start.
Yeah, this show produce a revenue stream or not?
Yeah. Yeah. More on
the battle for eyeballs. The battle for eyeballs is intense.
Well, look at this way. There's only one of you, right?
There's only one. Well, I'm being drawn and quartered. I'll tell you that.
But on a real note, actually, it's been kind of disheartening because I've actually put a lot of freaking time into doing this show, like a lot, like at times 70 hours a week. And when I look at the person who's doing, I'm just taking something out of the blue, cat videos, or I see somebody, playing video games or doing something else, and maybe they started around the same time I did. I started in the summer of 2024, and they're at way more subscribers, way more followers, invariably more cash flow. And I'm like, sometimes like, okay, why am I doing this? Now, granted, this
I saw a post where Mark Levin posted something in a typical Mark Levin sort of way.
Yeah.
And some prominent podcaster said, I can get more clicks from showing a piece of moldy bread. And he showed a picture of moldy bread, and he got way more clicks than Mark Levin.
Don't get me started with that guy. I mean,
oh, I hate him. Oh, do I hate him?
I can't believe.
But that's personal. For me, it's personal now. He attacked me pretty hard, and it's like, no, Mark, no.
Ted Cruz too.
Ted Cruz, Victor Davis Hanson, Laura Loomer.
I used to think highly of Victor Davis Hanson. He actually lives 30 minutes from me. Believe it or not.
I still think he must be good at stuff, but he showed his colors a little too clearly when he didn't just attack me, which I said, look, my sense was that since Cruz and Levin were not having an effect, they brought Hanson off the bench to somehow finish the job. But he kept doing it over and over and over. And it's curious, I had to write about it, and he was wrong on everything. He was factually wrong on history. Someone explained that to me. He was factually wrong on the history. And then some other blogger I just ran into, I was looking for a link or something, and I ran into this blog, and the guy went through Hanson's argument, said these are the most disingenuous arguments you could make right here. So some other blogger totally independently picked up on Hanson being disingenuous in his attacks, but that was sobering for me to be attacked by Hanson.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Levin, I called him a rabid bobcat from hell, but I had president of the JNS, which is some Jewish National Society of some kind. Sounds like that's what it is. And I've seen him, a guy named Morton Klein. I've seen him with Trump. He's very prominent. He called me a Holocaust-denying Nazi. And I implied he was a lying pig fucker. And I chose pig carefully. And then I suggested that he take up a hobby like bukkake, like Harvey Weinstein. And then I suggested that he go fuck himself. And Morton just pissed me off. And calling me a Holocaust-denying Nazi is almost libelous, right? I hate the fact that everything we say could be libel. That's why I don't like using the legal system to go with Trump and guys like that, and to shut. The legal system should be left to do the right thing, and it's probably a delusion, right? What kind of?
Oh, it's corrupt. It's so corrupt. I mean, it's all like people. Like for me, go ahead.
It's more corrupt now is the problem.
Oh, for sure. Well, I think it completely has to be repositioned. We can't vote our way out of it. I'll borrow. I think Drew Treglia said that. He said you can't vote your way out of this stuff. And also, as far as VDH and these other people, I think sometimes the society gets so caught up in credentials that this person is the foremost authority on it. I'll use history for an example because I was actually working on a master's on actually the last time I had you on. I was like, well, I think I better focus on this show. I think this is going to be probably more promising in the long run. But I'm going to just say that so much obviously the history has been obfuscated, and I'm surprised. Like I was reading about Operation Barbarossa for a period of time on a master's, reading a lot of books on it, and no doubt, I'm sure a lot of the stuff that they dispense is true. And some topics I was surprised that they covered, but they don't talk about secret societies that underline these events. They'll say, well, it's the bankers, the Germans were getting at it in World War II, but okay, but it's the secret societies that were, that are there. And there's certain things, of course, they don't talk about. So they definitely, it leads people on, is what I'm getting at. So,
I was an adjudicator on a thesis written by a guy. I commented on a public article, which I called out bullshit in the comment, and I signed my name. And some guy reached out to me. I said, "I'm just guessing. Is this you? Did you make this comment?" I said, "Yeah, that's me." And it turns out he was running for Congress out of Texas, and he lived in Dallas. And it turns out that that I was going to Dallas 2 weeks later. So I met up with him for lunch, and he didn't win, but he's a businessman. But he was writing a thesis on conspiracy theories. And so he signed me up as the external adjudicator of his thesis. And so I'm officially an adjudicator on a thesis on conspiracy theories.
Well,
which is another novelty, another stone to put. The Brandon, what's his name? Tarzan, played Tarzan. Brendan Fraser. Brendan Fraser.
Yeah. Brendan Fraser.
And Joe Pesci. And Pesci was this bum, and Fraser was a master's student from Harvard. And one point, Pesci ends up with Brendan's thesis, and he won't give it back. But Fraser says that's my life, and Pesci says that's pathetic. And Pesci pulls out this bag of stones, and he says, every time something important happened to me in my life, I'd pick up a stone. He said, he pours into his hand. He says, this was when my first son was born. And then he says, this was when my first date of my wife. He said, this was a woman in Bimini, right? But the idea of picking up stones as a metaphor going through life, I think, is a really interesting one, where it's just, to me, experiences are not seeing Niagara Falls, it's people. It's absolutely people. It's having dinner with Ron Paul. It's being on Tucker Carlson. Those are way more important than seeing Niagara Falls or, whatever. I, by the way, live in Ithaca, New York. I'm not far from Niagara Falls. I've never seen it. That's pretty weird, isn't it?
How long you been there? In Ithaca?
I've been in central New York my entire life. So I went from Syracuse briefly in grad school in New York City, and then back to Ithaca, Syracuse to Cornell and Ithaca, to Columbia, New York City, back to Cornell and Ithaca. So I could have gone to Niagara Falls.
Well, I'm about an hour from Yosemite, and I'm sure there's a lot of people in my area who have never been. So,
And I've been to Yosemite. That's ironic.
yeah. Oh my goodness.
One stone I have, which, I worked really hard in college, but I didn't do well because I wasn't a good student. And so I had to learn how to be a student because I wasn't a good student in high school. So I had a lot of backfilling to do in college, but I worked excruciatingly hard, got better. But I went to Columbia, and due to something that's nothing short of like Miracle on Ice, 1980, U.S. beating the Russians in hockey, I found myself being offered interviews for jobs at the end of my second year of grad school. So normally it takes 5 years plus 2 or 3 year postdoc. And I got my degree in 2.5 years, and found myself, I had a job offer from Cornell before I turned 25. And boy, was I green when I started. I wasn't as green as most third year grad students, but I was still pretty green. And I remember I was at Caltech talking to a guy who became a friend, but he was a veteran. He said, "You're the young guy, right?" And I said, "Yeah, that would be me." He says, "Third year?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You finished your third year?" I said, "No, I'm just starting my third year." He goes, "Really?"
Wow.
Yeah, that was strange. And you could put me back in grad school 100 times, I wouldn't be able to redo it. It was just bolts of lightning working for me. So everything worked. It was just Miracle on Ice.
Well, it tells me that you were in your zone of genius. You were aligned.
I found it. Just everything worked. Everything aligned up. I put in a lot of hours, long, 7-day weeks, 14 hours a day. So I put in about 5 years worth of work in those 2.5 years. But still, I couldn't replicate. I couldn't do that more than once in my lifetime. And I think it was because of that I actually changed fields when I got to Cornell, because I realized that if I did not, I'd already peaked. So I had to throw myself back to the bottom of some new ladder. And so I went from being what's called synthetic organic chemistry to organometallic chemistry. And I didn't know anything about it. I had no courses in it or anything. So I was just, just Hail Marys, right from the get-go. But survived, and it worked well for 45 years. I was an organometallic chemist.
Yes. You must have had just a burning desire to succeed in.
I did not want to fail due to mediocrity. So I wasn't afraid of hitting a bridge abutment doing 70. I was afraid of just running out of gas. I was afraid of achieving what I set out to achieve and having it not mean shit. And so I was happy to be the guy who, head out in an outrigger into the Pacific Ocean, hoping to find Hawaii instead of Easter Island, whatever, instead of just dying out in the Pacific. And but open water was what I went looking for. I've always been contrarian. So I've always avoiding crowds, being different. Being different was always a goal. And
I think there's
as a kid, I went skydiving when I was 16. It was illegal, but I just lied, things like that. So,
Yeah, I'm finding that sometimes, certain situations, God or the universe, whatever people, subscribe to, it just kind of over time prods you where you need to be, or at least that's how I like to look at it, and then you find, your superpower. What are you aligned with, so to speak? And you're in that flow state, and it doesn't feel like work, so to speak. And so,
well, yeah, I know. One time I watched Howard Cosell get interviewed, and he was dying, and they asked him about his career. And of course, he was an illustrious newscaster, right? And he said it all seems so stupid. And I'm thinking, don't ever let yourself find yourself in that position. Don't look back and say it all seems stupid. It might be unavoidable. You never know. You could be getting close to your deathbed and go, why did I do all that? Right? What was that? What's that mean? If you're dying, you might draw that conclusion almost unavoidably. right? But I'm kind of hoping not. I do find myself pondering what I achieved, what I maybe didn't achieve. But I'd say professionally, I have no complaints. The interesting good news for me, it's twisted, but my wife had all sorts of health problems. The good news for me was it meant that I had to become the primary caregiver to my kids.
Mm-hmm.
And so I took them to every sporting event, took them to school, picked them up from school, got dinner, got them dressed, got them everything. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if I wasn't forced to. I would have, if it was a choice, I could have, distanced myself and said, oh, I got to get my career going. Oddly, you can't really see in my career, you can't see the periods that were the toughest. You can't see it in the published record. You can't say, oh, clearly look at very few papers during this period. He must have been struggling. There's no fingerprints of the problems that were at times acute. And even like I was department chair and stuff, right? I mean, I coached 2 collegiate sports. These are stones, right? This is Joe Pesci picking up stones, right? So somehow what allowed it to happen, and this is advice to everyone. I was once told by an administrator, he says, you're the best delegator I've ever seen. I said, you know why? And he goes, why? And I said, because I'm lazy. But it really came down to, I realized, first of all, don't do what you don't have to do. Start with that. If you don't have to do it, skip it. My wife sometimes gives me, either you do it or I do it. I go, no, there's a third choice. There really is. But I would give the task to someone and say, what is that? What do you got there?
I don't know if you can read it.
A business in life, you don't get what you deserve. You get what you negotiate. Oh, interesting. But I'd give a task to one of my colleagues, say, you're chairing this committee and you're in charge. And then it's just gone, just off my plate. And that's delegating, right? You don't delegate and then micromanage the person you delegated to. And I also made the assumption if it fucks up, I'm blaming that guy, right? It's your job, it's your win, it's your loss, you're in charge.
Absolutely.
And so I learned a lot from the challenges that my wife's health posed, but it was a net win for me. I mean, I got to be the guy. I got to be that guy. I got to be the right guy. So, and I'm not sure I could have done it if I was given a choice.
Oh, there's something to be said about when the vice is tightened, or when you're put in certain situations, it just forces you. And I suspect that for some people, they need that. They don't have that, and thereby there's an element of complacency that exists. It's wow. Dave, is there anything else that you'd like to touch on?
Well, I have. Last year I put together 17 years in review with Bob Moriarty's help. Him paying the bill for a copy editor to go through all 17 and roughly 4,000 pages. I had to write a dean's report this year, and I was about to say, look, I wrapped up my program a year ago, so I didn't do shit this year. And then I realized that I published 17 books. Averaging about 250 pages plus per book. I said, so most people did not publish 17 books this year. And so that's out there. And I think they're actually, curiously, if someone really has time on their hands, they're actually all readable. I attempted not to repeat. So if you start with 2009 and move forward, topics, there's some repetition where I talk about the state of the markets, and you can't help but have some overlap. But each year, there were plot lines that were unique to that year. And I think I learned a lot by having to go through them again. I had to read all 4,000 pages and fix some stuff. And so, but I learned from reading my own writing, actually. So if you want to go to Amazon for 17 for under $400. You can buy all 17 volumes. I know Tony Deeden, who's a good friend of mine. He bought all 17. I haven't checked the stats. I didn't get rich off it. I can guarantee you that. You don't get rich selling volumes that are free on the internet. So,
well, it's obviously a great way to support you. And I do remember Bob mentioning that he was a big fan of yours in review, and that there's book versions of, hard copies of it, so to speak. So also, how can people learn more about you and get in touch if they'd like?
Start with Twitter at David B. Collum. If you need to hear more, you just search my name on YouTube. You know the drill on that one. I should have my own YouTube channel, but no way. And if you really want to, you can reach me by email. I make you find it, but if you know I'm at Cornell, you know I'm an organic chemist, and you know my name. If you can't find my email, you're kind of too retarded to talk to. So.
And then lastly, when is your world tour?
My world tour. My world tour was Tucker Carlson, right?
Okay.
My world that was my world tour. Yeah, I peaked at that point. I was unless Joe Rogan. I guess there might be someone. I thought Rogan might show up. I didn't picture Tucker showing up. If you're out there, Joe, I do want to join you. I'll fly to Austin and we'll sit down and chat. But with Tucker, that was a big win, and I didn't realize I was walking into World War III by mistake. I didn't realize that I was about to enter the fray, and it got kind of ugly when I made some totally offhand comment that was totally innocuous, and the Zionists decided they didn't like me. And now I don't like them, so it works out fine. So no, that's it. That was the high water mark. That was my Miracle on Ice 2.0. There's no way I was supposed to end up on Tucker Carlson. That was not something that I could have seen coming.
Well, I'm
so was Luke, by the way. So was Luke. So was Werner.
That's right. Yeah, I've seen some of Werner's text. Excuse me. Yeah, I guess you call it text or whatever, posts on X, and he's pretty red pilled.
Yeah, and he's really articulate. So who
you I don't know if you've met Mas Polzovic. He's a friend of Professor Werner.
What's his name?
His name is Mas. It's short for Matthias. He's Danish. Mads. Mads. It's spelled Mads, like Mads, like a Mads, but it's Mas. It's pronounced. Yeah, Mas Polzovic. Yep, I've had him on a couple times. A great guy.
Yeah, I've not had any real serious interactions with.
Yeah, they did him dirty. They did him dirty. He I don't know if you know his story, but he was vocal with Janet Yellen actually at a I think it was like a Christmas party or something. He was just asking questions as it relates.
Got shit faced.
Well, he was just asking questions as it relates to IMF loans and the ethics behind some of the stuff going on that he started observing as an investment banker, and he very quickly found out he was without a job. And then after attempts at trying to find other work in the investment banking world, he was blacklisted.
Who was the guy who started asking Yellen questions from the Wall Street Journal? And I went on a crusade to try to get him back into the press room. And it didn't succeed. But he reached out and said, I really appreciate the effort you put in to try to get me back in there. Yeah. What's his name? God damn it. Very famous journalist.
He was kicked out.
He was kicked out of the press room when he started leaning on Yellen. God damn it. I can picture his face.
Pull it up here.
Who was kicked out of the press room for asking Janet Yellen tough questions? We'll probably get
Pedro da Costa.
Yes, Pedro. Free
Okay.
Pedro. I set up a free Pedro campaign on Twitter for about 2 or 3 days. And yeah, Pedro da Costa. And I didn't figure he even noticed, but he said, "Oh, you can't imagine what a difference it made watching you banging away on Twitter trying to help me."
Well, you
I
can't
met
even. Mhm.
I met Eric Weinstein through when his brother got beat up at Evergreen State, and he obviously defended his brother, and I was out there defending his brother when everyone else was beating the shit out of his brother. And so I think Eric noticed that I was helping the Weinstein family a lot. And so, I got to know Andy Huzar, who was the guy who bought all the bonds for QE. And I ended up visiting him in his apartment in Manhattan, and we went to Cirque du Soleil together in Las Vegas, and you know what he does now? He's the guy who bought all the bonds. He sells women's clothing. He really left Wall Street with "This is a soulless place. Get me out of here."
Wow, I hear that from
Andy
a lot of
Huzar.
people.
Yeah, and then he debated an MIT economist. I think it was a month debate. And that's how I went down to New York, because Andy invited me to come down to see it, which surprised me because when I got there, it was his family and me. And I'm going, what did I do to get that invite? And then I slept at his apartment that night, and somehow I realized that sometimes you just connect, and I should reach out to him. And yeah, who was he debated? Oh God, who's that famous economist at MIT? And I introduced myself to the economist at MIT, and he said, "Oh, you're that chemist." Yeah, that's fucked up.
MIT economist.
MIT economist. There's a Huzar debate about QE ? I'm as soon as I see his name, it's going to jump. I go, yeah. Simon Johnson.
Simon Johnson. Yeah.
The one thing chemistry taught me is that the experts can get it profoundly wrong. I went into a field that the experts just had it wrong. It was a big mess. 45 years. I don't think I published a single paper that didn't correct someone. And the superpower it gave me was the ability to look at a panel of experts, 12 central bankers who all agree and say, "I think you're all full of shit." That's a skill that very, very few people have. That's like a Harvard 1950s psych experiment where people just can't break from the pack. They go with the pack, the one where the lines are different lengths, and they say which is the longest line, and they just go with the crowd. I do not go with the crowd. I'm the guy who would say, "I think you're all fucked up. You're all nuts. I don't know what you're looking at, but you're all nuts." I have no trouble with that. I'm not afraid of being alone in an opinion, and that sometimes gets me in trouble. Yeah, that was in 2013. Yeah, that's about right. Yeah, so it was, what the hell was the debate? As a part of an Intelligence Squared US event, I think it was a monk debate, but it doesn't say it. Anyway, it's people. It's not things. It's not material wealth. It's people for me. It's getting to meet people like you, Christian.
Well, likewise, I agree with you. I think life is about relationships at the end of the day, and I think as long as you are you're enjoying yourself, no matter where you are socioeconomically, and you have the relationships, and you're living an honest life. That's all that matters.
Well, that must have been what Howard Cosell was missing when he said it all seems stupid. He must have maybe had family that he was estranged from or something. There's got to be a plot there.
There's always something there.
There's always something there.
There's
Yeah.
a-
He had
there's always-
Muhammad
yeah.
Ali. He had Muhammad Ali to hang out with.
Yeah. Wow. Well, Dave, I appreciate you making the time. I really admire. I look at you as almost kind of like a polymath in a sense, where you have a lot of different things from which to draw on. A lot of people.
Where
don't
does
have
that word come from? What's the etymology of
It's
polymath?
got. I don't know. It's got to be Greek or something. Would be my guess.
I guess poly
But-
and math.
Yeah.
I get
Yeah.
poly.
Here, I'll pull
I
it.
get
I had my actually, you know who's a really interesting guy you should meet is my friend Tarek Reshek. This guy's incredible. I had him on my show. Just incredible. You probably should meet him. I mean, he's
do a
he's got a-
three-way. I do three-ways all the time.
yeah. I'll have to introduce you to.
I should have been a porn king. I should have three-way. Threesomes
Yeah.
are big.
Yeah, Tarek could actually be a pretty good guy to meet. He's been shot at before. He's been over 60 countries. He's Palestinian. He's been in 5 wars.
Well, I bet he has a negative view of Israel.
Oh yeah, yep. He's working on. He's got a couple of ventures where Meta and ResMat behind the CPAP machine is interested. What else? He's able to render soil that is inoperable for real estate development. He's able to render it available for use. He's a pretty incredible guy. I'll have to get you in touch with him. He lives in beautiful Newport, Southern California, Newport Beach area. So
With all the other rich guys. That's where Bill Gross lives.
yeah, Bill Gross. Yeah, that's yeah.
The former bond king,
Who's the current bond king?
Jeff Gundlach,
Oh, that okay, Jeff. Yeah. Wow.
who, by the way, is very bearish.
Hmm.
I'll agree with smart guys if they share my views.
Sure. Yeah. There you go. Well, now I'm wondering if I should just liquidate everything. If I should just go cash and just.
I don't know. I have a lot of cash. I have a lot of precious metals, and the rest is kind of white noise.
Mhm.
And I've been trying to buy some energy, but I do believe that when the markets finally decide to correct in earnest, everything will go down.
I think so.
You
too.
sell everything. You sell
some-
everything.
Something's big is coming.
Feels it to me, but it's felt like that for 10 years now. So, and people say you've been wrong for so long. Why should I listen to you? And I go, someday I'll be right.
That's right.
And then you're going to be in fetal position, dude. Right? The guys who say that to me are the ones who tell me we're getting close, because I'm getting hostility now.
Hmm.
There's a guy named Babson who warned all through the 20s that the markets were going to break. And then one day in October of 1929, he gave one last speech. They call it the Babson break, where it broke like a day or two later. And he said, I've been trying to tell you. What's interesting is the markets were not that overvalued, but they were pumped by huge amounts of debt that had been a consumer debt bubble. And so their sort of standard PE ratios were not crazy, but it's because they were living in a debt bubble. So people were buying appliances on credit. And then back in those days, you didn't get to just write it off. And so you lost everything because you lost your job, and then you couldn't pay back the debt, and the banks failed, and real estate bubbles burst. And so the markets by traditional valuation metrics were not that wacky.
Well, at least we don't have debtor's prison. That's an interesting topic. How many well-known people have been thrown in there because they couldn't satisfy those?
And they don't feed you when you're in there, I'm told. Your family has to feed you.
Or indentured servitude. Yeah. Very interesting stuff. Well, appreciate you tuning in and watching. If you enjoyed it, if you enjoyed the video, you found value, and I encourage you to like, share, subscribe, /follow. The show is on YouTube and Spotify. Always look forward to your feedback, and appreciate you tuning in. Be well and take care.